Do not call Bobby Brown the man who ruined Whitney Houston's life, because the thing that truly buried her had already been reigning inside that mansion long before he ever walked through the door. For the past 30 years, the whole world has been led by the nose to believe a single script: the thug who dragged an angel down into the mud. But the night guards who once stood watch for the Houston family back then whisper a far more chilling tale. Many theories from the underworld suggest that a ruthless industrial machine needed the perfect sacrificial lamb to conceal the rot festering inside their empire. And Bobby Brown, with his prepackaged bad boy label, was the ultimate pawn. In the next few minutes, you will uncover the mystery of how the puppet masters turned the Gulbum golden boy of R&B into a living trap. You will understand the devastating reason why Bobby Brown has to carry a life sentence on his back, even though he never truly stepped behind bars. Part 1. The Fabricated Portrait. Let's rewind time, back to the cold and unforgiving streets of the Orchard Park projects in Boston in the late 70s. There was no room for the weak there. It was a neighborhood reeking of danger, where the wailing of police sirens every night was the most familiar lullaby for the children. Amidst those cramped, dilapidated public housing blocks, young Bobby Brown grew up. For Bobby, music wasn't just singing for fun, it was his sole lifeline, keeping him from ending his life in prison or bleeding out on some street corner. Old neighbors recount that, from a very young age, Bobby had to learn how to bare his fangs to protect himself. When Bobby and a few friends formed the group New Edition, they started by singing on the streets just to scrape together spare change. The bad boy label, the arrogance, and his reckless nature later on were not concocted by some entertainment agency's PR team to attract an audience. It was pure survival instinct in a street world infested with deceit, and later in a music industry controlled by powerful white men. Bobby understood that if he didn't appear dangerous and rebellious, he would be bullied and swallowed whole. But elsewhere, not far from Boston, existed a polar opposite world. That was Newark, New Jersey, where Whitney Houston was born and raised. Her arrival into a family with a colossal musical legacy seemed to have predetermined her fate. Her mother was Cissy Houston, a renowned gospel singer. In her home, legends like Aretha Franklin or Dionne Warwick were regular guests. Many who attended services at the New Hope Baptist Church back then still vividly remember the image of little Whitney standing and singing in the choir, the sunlight piercing through the stained glass, and her voice ringing out so crystal clear and soaring that it gave everyone goosebumps. Everything looked so perfect and divine. But behind those beautiful notes lay a crushing, monumental pressure. From the time she was a teenager, Whitney had fallen into the crosshairs of record label tycoons. They sat in the audience, looking at her not as a girl who loved to sing, but as a future billion-dollar money-making machine. Very quickly, Whitney was thrust into a rigorous training regimen. Every step, every smile, every dress she wore was meticulously calculated by Arista Records. They chipped away at everything deemed too strong or too primal about a young black woman. They draped over her the image of a pop princess, utterly pure, obedient, and saintly. Their goal was crystal clear: to create a musical product that could satisfy every demographic of the American audience, especially the white audience. Whitney was locked inside an invisible glass cage, heavily guarded but never allowed to defy anyone's wishes. Veteran music producers who worked in the studios back then whisper that there were nights Whitney broke down sobbing. She cried because she was forced to sing a line over and over again until the raspy, soulful texture characteristic of black music was completely stripped away. They wanted to rip out her true essence just to sell more records. And what about Bobby? Bobby was the embodiment of everything Whitney's label despised. He wore baggy clothes, donned massive gold chains, and danced raw, spontaneous street routines without needing a choreographer. Bobby's emergence wasn't just a culture shock. It was like a direct slap in the face to the tycoons desperately trying to mold a white girl in a black woman's skin. From the very beginning, that stark contrast made him an eyesore to the powers that be. When Bobby and Whitney began appearing together, the media thought they had struck gold. Newspapers scrambled to write articles, dubbing this a real-life Beauty and the Beast tale. One was the symbol of purity, the other the personification of trouble and scandal. The audience was effortlessly sucked into this theatrical contrast. However, behind the scenes, in the shadowy corners untouched by camera lenses, the story took a vastly different turn. Backstage crew members, makeup artists, and hotel doormen of that era often murmured about what they witnessed with their own eyes. They saw an exhausted Whitney Houston, her eyes hollow after hours of pasting on an industrial, manufactured smile for national television. They saw a horrifying pressure weighing down on the young woman's shoulders, forcing her to constantly maintain a flawless image to feed the colossal machine standing behind her. Many longtime entertainment industry insiders formulated a very realistic theory. The two of them didn't gravitate toward each other purely out of curiosity or superficial glamour. They crashed into each other because they recognized each other's pain. When the eyes of a street kid, constantly bracing himself to fight society, met the eyes of a princess suffocating in her golden cage, they found profound empathy. Bobby saw Whitney's confinement, and Whitney saw in Bobby a wild, reckless freedom she constantly craved but never dared to express. They never had any intention of dragging each other into the mud. Rumors suggest they were merely trying to cling to one another to find an escape from the invisible prisons others had built for them. But neither could have foreseen just how exorbitant and brutal the price for that freedom would be. Part 2. The Golden Cage and the Truth About the Angel. But for that yearning for freedom to warp into a lingering nightmare, we must look back at the period right before they exchanged wedding rings. It was a golden era where the entire world seemed to rest comfortably in the palms of their hands. Let's rewind to the late 80s, if you lived through that era. You certainly couldn't forget the searing heat of the name Bobby Brown. That young black man wasn't just your average R&B singer. After leaving New Edition and overcoming initial skepticism, Bobby dropped the album Don't Be Cruel. The atmosphere of 88 to 89 burned fiercely with his explosive dance moves on every street corner, from barbershops to family cookouts. Bobby, at that time, was a true king of street music. He personally fired his old manager, dictated his own path, and shattered rigid standards to bring vibrant, pulsating music to the grandest stages. The arrogant confidence, the reckless smirk of the youth from Boston created an irresistible magnetism. He relied on no one, no system or tycoon could force him to obey their tedious rules. At that exact moment, Whitney Houston was standing at the pinnacle of the most flawless script music history had ever witnessed. Her sophomore self-titled album continually shattered every record. Her sweet hits dominated the charts week after week. The pious girl draped herself in magnificent, luxurious evening gowns, raised her angelic voice, and became America's most beautiful dream. The press constantly plastered her image on front pages with soaring praises. Yet, every greatness casts a dark, gloomy shadow. There is a historical event that the older generations, we black people, will never forget: the 1989 Soul Train Awards. That event wasn't merely the fateful setting where Whitney met Bobby. It was an open wound, exposing the brutal reality of the shackles she was forced to bear. That night, when Whitney's name was called to receive her award, mixed with the applause were boos and bitter jeers from her own community in the audience. They booed because they believed she had forgotten her roots, that her music had been whitewashed, made far too safe merely to appease corporate music capitalists and white audiences. Imagine the agony of an artist standing at the zenith of glory, only to be rejected by her own people. That night, camera lenses captured Whitney still smiling, but it was a painfully forced, agonizingly professional smile, the pressure to maintain the facade of a spotless angel so as not to offend the elite, while simultaneously swallowing the bitter pill of her roots. Rejecting her seemed to drain the very last drop of her sanity. Bartenders and longtime housekeepers at underground New York nightclubs used to whisper vague accounts of a completely different Whitney after the stage lights went out. They passed around stories that occasionally they'd see her sneaking in through the back door at the crack of dawn, looking haggard, her eyes exhausted, shrouded in an overwhelming loneliness. Backstage whispers claimed that the crushing weight of being the label's golden goose had strangled her soul. Her piety was no longer a genuine trait, it had become forced labor, and she desperately craved an exit. She wanted to rebel just to prove she was still alive. Remember the feeling of a trapped woman, booed by her own community. A former backstage worker once recounted that after that boo-filled Soul Train Awards night, Whitney locked herself in her dressing room and completely broke down. Not a single record executive stepped in to comfort her, because to them, she was merely a money printing machine. If it breaks, just fix it. Unlike the suit-clad men who constantly dictated her every move, Bobby walked in and looked at her like a normal human being. Rumor has it that his first words to her that day weren't empty praises about her vocal range. It was a blunt, raw, street-level remark meant to snap her out of her panic. For Whitney, that abrasive bluntness was the exact sincerity she thirsted for most. He didn't care that she was a princess. He just saw a girl who was shattering into pieces and needed a shoulder. And so, Bobby Brown, carrying the wildfire of the streets, approached her backstage that night. What truly happened? The media has wasted thousands of gallons of ink pushing the narrative that this bad boy seduced and dragged an angel into the gutter. However, many independent psychological analysts and people who deeply understand the hypocrisy of showbiz propose a completely opposite theory. Bobby didn't proactively taint Whitney. In reality, it was his rough edges, his fiercely free-spirited lifestyle, and his devil-may-care attitude that became the very lifeline Whitney actively grabbed onto. She saw in Bobby an authenticity, a life free from play-acting, something her management system never permitted her to have. Bobby was like a pair of wings for her to temporarily fly out of the cold golden cage, escaping the draconian demands of the men counting money off her vocal cords. Tragically, intoxicated by love and fame, Bobby Brown was too naive. He thought he possessed the strength to protect this woman. He had no idea that when he signed that marriage license, he wasn't just marrying a wife, he was stepping into a direct, head-on collision with one of the most ruthless industrial machines in America, an empire ready to pulverize anyone who stood in the way of their flawless money printer. The most tragic play of his life was raising its curtains. Part 3. The scapegoat torn apart by the media. The lavish 1992 wedding passed in a flash, leaving behind a cold, calculating reality after they moved in together, a bizarre, chilling coincidence began to plague Bobby Brown. His blazing career suddenly ground to a halt. It didn't decline naturally. It was as if an invisible hand was intentionally strangling it. Promotional campaigns were slashed. His tours were no longer the grandiose spectacles they used to be. From a pioneering superstar, the press gradually morphed him into a parasite on late-night talk shows. Hosts began to mock him, sarcastically referring to him as Mr. Houston. The ego of a successful man was brutally stripped away. And then, when the fractures inside their home began to surface, when Whitney's saintly facade could no longer conceal habits that were destroying her health, the media instantly launched a predatory campaign. They swarmed, tore into him, and dumped every horrific sin squarely onto Bobby's head. Every tabloid flashed blood-red headlines, painting him as a demon from the slums, the man who smuggled deadly illicit substances into the house to corrupt his angelic wife. They spun a story that was all too easy to swallow, because his bad boy label had already been permanently pinned into the public's mind. But let's pause for a moment. Years later, a few former bodyguards, the men who once wore thick coats, standing with crossed arms guarding the perimeter of their sprawling Mendham mansion in New Jersey through the dead of night, hinted at a chilling secret in private interviews. The men who worked closest to this family whispered to one another, those toxic habits, those soul-destroying white powders, had actually been present since Whitney's grueling tour days. Long before Bobby ever entered her life. Some theories from music industry insiders even suggest that the crushing pressure from those closest to her, those who profited off her fame, was the true catalyst that pushed her into dependency. She was exhausted before she ever met Bobby. But when the risk of exposure became imminent, when the Golden Girl image stood on the precipice of collapse and threatened to vaporize billions of dollars for the record labels, the media machine had to act fast. They needed to protect the angel at all costs. And in this ruthless gamble, who was the perfect meat shield? Who was the one person the public was ready to condemn without demanding a shred of evidence? It was the black youth with the thug label from Boston. Just look back at how the American press treated white rock stars of the same era. They trashed hotel rooms, they drowned in narcotics, and the media gently dubbed it the rock star lifestyle. But when Bobby Brown, a black man, got entangled in similar troubles, they immediately labeled him a criminal, a piece of trash. The infamous television interview from that era is the clearest proof. Broadcasters deliberately manipulated camera angles, zooming tight onto their glassy eyes, forcing them to bleed out their family wounds for millions to dissect over dinner. Studio employees from those days whispered that the interview script was rigged by the networks with questions designed to destroy. Their sole objective was to frame Bobby as the mastermind behind every catastrophe, utterly whitewashing the colossal pressure exerted by the entertainment system standing behind Whitney. To this day, many sharp observers still believe that Bobby gritted his teeth and bore the brunt of public execution, swallowing the curses just to keep his wife's crown from falling. Perhaps, at the time, he thought doing so was protecting the woman he loved. But the monumental weight of that injustice, the daily public shaming on TV and in print, slowly broke his spirit. He began losing control in front of the cameras, flying into misdirected, explosive rages. He truly spiraled into psychological crises, losing his very sense of self. Yet the most merciless truth, one the world was completely blind to, was this the ultimate tragedy? The sharpest blade of all was still lying in ambush, waiting precisely for the moment they decided to sign the divorce papers and let go of each other in the hopes of finding peace. Part 4. The Curse of Fame and Generational Tragedy. Many people, especially middle-aged fans who had followed them through their countless ups and downs, breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that the 2007 divorce would be the final period marking the end of the stormy days. That signing the papers to go their separate ways would be the best method for two deeply scarred souls to take refuge from public scrutiny, heal themselves, and rebuild their lives. However, that divorce decree offered no salvation whatsoever. It acted like a cold, ruthless ticking clock counting down to an infinitely more horrific collapse, even when their marriage had hit the rock bottom of despair prior to the divorce. The media machine still refused to let them go. On the contrary, they sadistically warped the agony of a family into an entertaining reality TV show called Being Bobby Brown. Instead of letting their family heal in peace, networks dragged cameras straight into their bedroom and living room, stalking them from the moment they ate to the moment they slept. They purposefully captured the ugliest, most unkempt, and most out-of-control moments of both husband and wife, broadcasting it to millions of viewers during dinner time. Several former studio hands later confessed on private forums that the script wasn't organic at all. They were ordered by higher-ups to continuously engineer provocative, aggravating situations to make Bobby snap on camera, and to expose Whitney looking utterly haggard. There are chilling rumors that inside luxurious, air-conditioned boardrooms, television executives raised their glasses to toast every time the couple had a screaming match. Because ratings would skyrocket, they bled the very last drop of blood from this marriage, mutating a family tragedy into a cheap circus to rake in tens of millions of dollars in ad revenue. By the time they actually signed the papers to split, the press had stripped them both of the last shreds of human dignity. And then, as we all know, the world permanently lost Whitney in the most agonizing, lonely, and cruel way imaginable inside room 434 of the Beverly Hilton Hotel in 2012. The backdrop of her passing truly laid bare the ice-cold veins of the entertainment industry. On the very eve of the Grammy Awards, while the body of the pop princess still lay cold and had not yet been removed from the building, just downstairs, the Hollywood elite were still strutting in their evening gowns, clinking glasses, partying wildly while the music pounded on. The machine stops for no one. That pain ripped through the hearts of millions of music lovers that day. Bobby was thousands of miles away performing. People backstage recounted that he collapsed, sobbing violently like a child upon hearing the news. But for Bobby Brown, the true fatal stab, the blade that plunged straight into his heart and twists there to this very day, was the event that occurred a few years later, the tragic, untimely death of his only daughter, Bobby Christina. That event carried a tone so profoundly dark and mysterious that it left the public in stunned, shivering silence. A girl barely in her 20s, carrying the blood of two legends, collapsed in a scenario that mirrored her mother's tragic end down to the exact, horrifying details, the same chilling circumstances, the exact same utter despair next to a bathtub full of cold water, even though the police and the media quickly closed the file, brushing it off as a coincidence stemming from the misguided lifestyle of youth. Psychologists and those with deeper insight posited a far more terrifying theory. They called it generational trauma. An eerie silence enshrouds these deaths. Try putting yourself in Bobby Christina's shoes. From the time she was in her crib, the child had to get used to the relentless flashing of camera strobes aimed directly at her face. As she grew slightly older, she had to listen to thousands of people out there curse her father as a monster and call her mother by the most vile names. How could a fragile soul grow up healthy, surrounded by a pack of news-starved wolves? In the dark corners of internet forums, a former assistant who once worked for the Houston family choked out anonymous words. That poor child, from the very moment she was born, was forced to carry an invisible curse on her shoulders. A curse forged from the cruelty of a hostile media machine, from the 1,000-ton weight of her parents' halo. That machine slowly devoured the entire marriage and finally turned to choke out the very last breath of oxygen from an innocent child. Bobby Christina grew up under thousands of scrutinizing spotlights, absorbing every vicious piece of gossip that had once pierced her parents, without a single shield strong enough to protect her. Even as the girl lay comatose fighting for her life in the hospital, paparazzi still found ways to sneak in to snap covert photos of her to sell for cash. Witnessing this sequence of events so heavily tinged with fate and so utterly merciless, audiences who had quietly followed the saga since the early 80s couldn't help but ask in anguish, is Bobby Brown being forced to pay a blood debt? An exorbitant price for accidentally stepping into a glamorous world of power where he inherently never belonged. In this wildly unequal war against the empire of fame, he was lucky enough to keep his life. But the form that remains is merely a soulless shell, housing a mind crisscrossed with wounds that can never be healed. The loss of Bobby Christina wasn't just losing a child. It was the total annihilation of hope, of every meaning of life he had desperately tried to cling to. When he lost that daughter, a piece of Bobby Brown's soul died permanently alongside her. Part 5. The Life Sentence for the Survivor. When the brilliant velvet curtains of the stage have closed, when the roaring applause yields to a deathly silence, let us look straight into the reality of Bobby Brown today. The image of a defiant superstar, dancing with wild abandon on stage, has now been replaced by a frail shadow imprisoned by his past. Gone are the masterful dance moves that used to detonate stadiums. Gone is the razor-sharp, arrogant gaze of an R&B king. We only see an aging man, walking with slow, heavy, silent steps. He permanently carries the abyss of agony, having consecutively witnessed his ex-wife, his beloved daughter, and later the gut-wrenching death of his son, Bobby Jr., all ripped away from his arms. 3 funerals, 3 times standing and watching his own flesh and blood lowered into the ground. Is there any pain on this earth that surpasses that threshold of endurance? Just imagine, every night when he closes his eyes, he must face the terrifying silence of an empty house, a place that once echoed with the laughter of his wife and children. To the women, mothers, and wives who have tasted all the bitter and sweet flavors of life, surely those watching this video understand there is no tragedy more cruel than a white-haired parent wiping away tears to bury their black-haired child. In our community, there have been far too many families shattered by invisible external pressures. Bobby Brown didn't just lose his most cherished loved ones, he was stripped of his voice and his right to be the pillar of his family. They turned him into a laughingstock on late-night variety shows. Every time his name is mentioned, it comes with a sneer, a biting, sarcastic remark. The press stripped away a man's pride. Many psychological theories argue that the way the media cornered and cursed Bobby throughout the 90s was a form of ruthless psychological warfare. It deliberately eroded his confidence, brainwashing him into believing he truly was a worthless piece of trash. When the whole world gangs up to tell you that you are a terrible human being, eventually, that darkness will swallow your mind. From there, it pushed him deeper into self-destructive behaviors. The press today has perhaps stopped tearing him apart. Tabloids have moved on to hunt younger artists, tangled in fresh new scandals, to carve up for clickbait. But the invisible sentence society handed down to him over 30 years ago still seems to hover right above his head. Even to this day, whenever the name Bobby Brown is brought up, people still click their tongues, accompanied by a reproachful shake of the head. He cannot walk into a room without feeling the judgmental glares pinned directly into his back. Certainly, none of us can deny that Bobby made some terrible personal mistakes. He is no saint. The misguided choices of his youth, the uncontrolled fits of rage were real. No one is making excuses for those things. However, if we take a step back, stripping away the stereotypical prejudices printed in the papers to view things more fairly, many people still whisper in passing conversations, is the price he is paying simply too steep? Other celebrities also make mistakes, but they are granted the opportunity to rebuild their lives. As for Bobby, he was handed a death sentence regarding his reputation. At the end of the day, Bobby Brown was just an unlucky pawn, a tiny puzzle piece thrown mercilessly into the brutal meat grinder of the American entertainment industry. A place where black artists always have to grit their teeth and endure pressures 100 times greater than normal just to avoid being squeezed dry and discarded. He was morphed by the media into the perfect villain to cover up for a colossal money-making system rotting from the inside out. Many in the underground music scene understand that the system always needs a scapegoat to blame whenever their billion-dollar icon shows signs of falling, and the street kid with no powerful backing was the most exquisite meat shield they could ask for. The 100% unvarnished truth behind the closed wooden doors of the Houston mansion will forever be buried under the tomb of time. There will never be a court on earth that stands to judge the invisible forces of the media. There will be no official apology ever issued. The system squeezed absolutely everything it could out of this marriage, raked in billions of dollars, and then abandoned him in the burning wreckage of his own life. But there is a chilling truth laid bare before our eyes. The halo of that era extended its giant tentacles to swallow Whitney Houston whole, swallowed the innocent children, and then it sadistically spat Bobby Brown back out, forcing him to keep on living. It forces him to keep waking up every single day, only to taste the most lingering, isolated, and absolute punishment of a survivor. To carry on his back the judgment of an entire generation that is truly the most agonizing life sentence of all, one that requires no prison bars. To the aunts, uncles, brothers, and sisters. To everyone who lived through the golden era of 80s and 90s music, who immersed themselves in those immortal love songs and witnessed both the glory and the horrifying collapse of this couple. What do you think after hearing about these dark, shadowy corners? Was Bobby truly the root of all the destruction? Or was he just a pitiful victim, pushed into a dead end and sacrificed for a pre-written play? The truth, ultimately, still lies in the minds of each individual. Please leave your comments and your perspectives down below so we can discuss this historical mystery together. If this video brought you a raw, razor-sharp, and unique perspective on the untold dark corners, don't forget to leave a subscribe. See you all in the next Dark Investigations.